Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you're analyzing global systems or maybe sitting in a college geography class right now, you're probably super used to looking at visible geography. Things like mountain ranges, national borders, major trade routes, and population centers. But today, we're going to explore something vastly different. We are diving into why food spoiling before it ever reaches the market is the absolute biggest hidden geographic crisis we face right now. We're talking about the invisible geography of the cold chain. Okay, to really hook you in, consider this simple but honestly devastating fact at the core of this global systems breakdown. Food spoils. It's just a fundamental law of biology, right? But in our modern world, the energy keeping that food fresh has suddenly become way too expensive. The diesel powering our refrigeration networks is failing us, and it's literally reshaping the map of global food security right before our eyes. So here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the invisible bridge, a geography of waste, the diesel dependency, the leaky bucket, and finally, preservation over production. Let's jump right in. Part 1, the invisible bridge. Let's define exactly what the cold chain is. Think of the cold chain as an invisible bridge across space. Actually, scratch that. It's more like a literal time machine. It connects the agricultural regions where food is grown to the urban centers where people actually eat it, and it pauses the biological clock on decay. By using this continuous link of refrigerated transport, cold storage warehouses, and climate-controlled shipping containers, we are essentially manipulating space and time for perishable goods. Without that unbroken link, the physical distance between the farm and the dinner table becomes a completely insurmountable barrier. Moving right along to Part 2, a geography of waste, looking at post-harvest food loss. Let's look at the numbers. The FAO estimates that developing nations lose an astonishing 30 to 40% of their food post-harvest. Now compare that to just 5 to 10% in the developed world. That is a massive geographical divide. And just to be completely clear here, this spatial disparity isn't about consumer leftovers or, tossing out half a sandwich after lunch. No, this is about entire harvests of crops literally rotting in the heat before they ever reach a market stall or grocery store shelf. It's a profound infrastructural failure that is deeply, deeply tied to exactly where you live on the map. Now, if you live in a wealthy nation, the cold chain is pretty much invisible to you until it breaks down. But in developing regions, specifically across parts of the Middle East, South Asia, and Africa, it is glaringly absent. The primary reason for that massive 30 to 40% loss is just inadequate refrigeration, and it exposes a monumental vulnerability in the global food supply chain. The cold chain is invisible when it works, but man, it becomes tragically obvious when the lettuce wilts, the dairy sours, and the meat turns in the sun. Which brings us to Part 3, the diesel dependency and the impact of the Hormuz crisis. So we have to look at the geopolitical shocks that alter our physical geography, specifically the energy shock driven by the Hormuz crisis. This event basically doubled diesel prices overnight across the exact same regions that already lacked robust cold chain infrastructure. Suddenly, the diesel generators in the trucks needed to keep food cold became prohibitively expensive. And you might be wondering, why is diesel the only option? Well, because in a lot of these regions, reliable electrical grids simply don't exist. When you don't have grid power, you rely entirely on liquid fuel. This just deepens the systemic reality. You aren't just relying on refrigeration, you are tethered entirely to the global price of diesel. Because refrigerator transport, you'll often hear them called reefer trucks, relies entirely on guzzling this super expensive diesel, operators get forced into a really harsh economic reality. Imagine you're hauling low-margin perishable food. If your fuel cost suddenly shoots up past the actual value of the cargo you're carrying, what do? You do the only thing you can do. You park your trucks. The infrastructure just stops moving entirely. And the immediate, on-the-ground consequence of those parked trucks is catastrophic. Fresh produce, dairy, meat, and fish that would have successfully navigated that whole journey to reach markets, instead, they just sit there and rot. The invisible bridge collapses. The food successfully made it through the agricultural step, but geography and economics prevented it from crossing that final mile. So it spoils in warm warehouses, on the sides of highways, and on loading docks. The food was successfully grown, but it never reaches a human stomach simply because the energy needed to keep it cold cost way too much. Let's look at Part 4, the leaky bucket, and why this is a double catastrophe. With diesel just way too expensive to run what little cold chain actually exists, those initial 30 to 40% post-harvest losses in developing countries don't just stay static. Tragically, they get pushed toward a staggering 50%. Half of all the food produced in these regions never fulfills its purpose.
If you're analyzing systems or mapping out resource management, a 50% system loss is just a complete, undeniable structural failure.
To use an analogy that is absolutely perfect for understanding global systems in a geography class, this is a leaky bucket. Look, we're currently facing a worldwide crisis where food production is already declining because of widespread fertilizer shortages. Producing food during a global fertilizer crunch is incredibly hard and resource intensive, but doing all of that work only to lose half of it to spoilage, it is exactly like pouring precious water into a bucket with a giant hole in the bottom. It's so exasperating. It's a true double catastrophe, declining agricultural production on one side and skyrocketing preservation failure on the other.
Finally, Part 5, Preservation over Production. The paradigm shift. A crop that's grown but spoils is the same as a crop that was never planted. I mean, wow, that quote directly from our source material hits the nail on the head, right? It sums up exactly why we have to completely rethink our logistics and our agricultural priorities. Think about it. All the land use, the water diverted, the heavy labor, the expensive fertilizer applied, it is all geographically meaningless if the calories simply never reach the people who need them. The mundane, kind of unglamorous diesel-powered refrigeration network is just as vital as the fertilizer that grows the food in the dirt in the first place.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, consider these crucial questions for your own spatial analysis. Does your country have adequate cold chain infrastructure? And looking at this globally, should our agricultural planners be focusing just as much on post-harvest preservation as they do on growing the food? It's a vital geographic puzzle to solve. Thanks for hanging out with me today, and keep questioning the systems around you.